Stephen, I need you to do something for me, and it's going to take courage. I need you to get up in front of the church and tell them that you fell.
Yeah.
Whew. Oh, man. Gosh, I was like, what? I was like, I don't want to do that. And you're like, Stephen, I need you to do it.
Yeah.
I need you to do it.
Yeah.
Because I don't want you to see what happens. I got in front of the church. It was at the community center. And I just said, hey, I have an issue with alcohol, and I fell, and I need your prayers. And boom, I stopped. Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Stephen Talks Oklahoma, or the Poop Podcast. Still haven't decided, but we will figure out what the name of this podcast is going to be real soon. So basically, this goal of this podcast is just to talk to people from here in Oklahoma and just listen to interesting stories and getting to know people here in Oklahoma. And the person we have on the podcast today is really, really special to me. And I'm not going to say I'm super excited, because I feel like that word's really overrated and a lot of people use it. But this person has meant a lot to me in my life. And so the person we're going to be talking to today is the pastor of the church and startup church in Owasso, Oklahoma, called the Refuge. His name is Scott Carlson, and it's a pleasure having you on the podcast today, Scott.
Thank you, Stephen. Glad to be here.
Yes. So before we get started, I wanted to give you a rapid questions of Oklahoma and things like that, and see what your answers are.
All right.
Here we go. Rapid questions for Pastor Scott. Here we go. Number 1, what is your favorite restaurant in Oklahoma?
My favorite restaurant in Oklahoma is Burn Co. for the ribs. Mm-hmm. It is Johnny's for the onion rings. But my all-time favorite one probably would be Trails Inn in Owasso.
All right. What is your favorite thing in Oklahoma to do?
Right now, it's Oklahoma City Thunder, and I'm representing, and I still believe that we can win Game 6.
What is your favorite church in Oklahoma?
My favorite church in Oklahoma? Gosh, Stephen, I don't know. Maybe the Refuge?
The Refuge. And then last one is, what is your favorite city in Oklahoma?
Oh, gosh, it's got to be Hobart, Oklahoma, Hobart. And it's where I grew up. And it's home.
What is the population of Hobart?
Well, now I think it's about 3,500. When I was there, it was about 5,000. But if you're from Hobart, you call it Hobart. If you're outside of Hobart, you call it Hobart.
All right, well, we're going to go back to Hobart here in just a second. But I wanted to ask you another question before we get started is, if you've heard in my intro, I'm having a tough time coming up with a name for my podcast. So literally everyone that I have asked about my podcast, even my producer, Sarah, hates the name The Poop, which stands for the People of Oklahoma Podcast. I think it's genius. I could sell a lot of merch. So what do you think about that name?
I mean, I understand why some people wouldn't like it. My wife probably wouldn't like it, but I love it.
You love it?
No, I really do. I think
literally that's why you're my favorite pastor.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right, so we got 1 vote versus like 1,000 people that said no. So I think I'm just going to listen to you and do it.
There you go.
So let's talk about you. I just want to get to know you and kind of where you started and how everything kind of transpired of why you took a role in a job and a career in ministry. So how did it all started? Like, you grew up in Hobart, and what kind of tell me about your childhood?
Sure. I was actually born in Enid, Oklahoma. And
I did not know that.
And I lived on a little farm between Lahoma and Mino, Oklahoma, until I was in 2nd grade. My dad was a farmer, and we moved to Hobart in 1969, where he bought a feed and seed company. And so I grew up in Hobart, and graduated high school in 1980. I went off to Bible school at Hardin-Simmons for a couple of years, and then I went on to Palm Beach Atlantic University in West Palm Beach, Florida. Really suffered for Jesus down there because we were right across the street from the Intercoastal Waterway, and you could literally walk to the ocean in 5 minutes. And so graduated there, met my wife during my last semester there. We got married, went to seminary, and then I have been on this journey of pastoring established churches for the last 30 to 40 years before we started the Refuge. But getting back to the calling, my parents divorced when I was in 5th grade, and it was a pretty ugly divorce. And early on, I really started looking out for the underdog, because we were kind of the underdogs. My mom, was a single parent in a small town, and my dad was a very successful businessman in town. And so we were kind of frowned upon in a sense. And when I was 16 years old, I gave my life to Christ. And ever since then, God has just placed upon my heart for people that, come from single parent families, or maybe they parents that lost a kid or something like that, which eventually led me to walk away from established churches and start what we call a hospital church. Mm-hmm. And, we have several sayings at the Refuge. One of them is that God wants to take your malady or your mess ups and he wants to turn it into your ministry. Oh, yeah. And I love the established churches. Don't get me wrong. I pastored Central Baptist Church in Owasso and was there for 11 years, and it was a great church. And several other churches, that I've pastored were great. But I just kind of see the last quarter of my life going on a little different direction.
Yeah. So growing up in Hobart, Oklahoma, Hobart, Oklahoma. Did your parents grow up in the church, or were you unchurched, or how did that kind of transpire?
Yeah, we occasionally went to a different church in Hobart, but it wasn't really a Bible believing church. It was definitely lacking in that. But we just went occasionally, and after my parents' divorce, my mother came to know the Lord.
Oh, okay.
And even though it's kind of funny because we would go to church, but my mother never had a real relationship with Jesus. And so once that happened, when I was in 5th grade, that's when we started going to the First Baptist Church of Hobart. And and I'm not saying that only Baptists believe in the Scripture. There's a lot of great churches that believe in the Scripture. Mm-hmm. It just so happened that the one that we were going to occasionally, it was just more of kind of a social club and things such as that. Right. But shortly after that happened, I started going to the church that my mother had gone to, and got involved in the youth group, and really they became a family to me. And it was through their influence and through their unconditional love for me that they really, they didn't preach me to the kingdom. They didn't guilt me to come into Jesus. They loved me to come into Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I know some people, come to the Lord out of fear, and I understand that, but I came to know Christ through the love of God's people because they were the real deal.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point. And I was kind of thinking about this last night, or actually I haven't been thinking about it just last night, but just always, is that as a recovering alcoholic, which we'll get into because you have a big part of that story of me getting sober and continuing my sobriety and now helping others, is that with recovery, it's self-discovery. At least that's how we have our recovery group. That's how a lot of other recovery groups like AA and Celebrate Recovery, they're all self-discovery. And I think sometimes the traditional church, or just not even traditional church, maybe just Christians, sometimes really try to push stuff on people versus letting it be more of a self-discovery of just loving people versus judging people.
Right.
And that's what I love about the Refuge so much, and what we've kind of created and over there is really, really cool. So you have a really cool story of how you got to be part of the youth group. Can you touch on that real quick?
Yeah,
I love that story.
Absolutely. And so when my mother became a believer and we started going to church, a lot like a lot of people, we kind of fell out. We stopped going. Mm-hmm. And it's really easy to get out of the habit of things. And so we had kind of stopped going for a couple of years. And one Saturday morning, there was a knock on the door, and I was in 7th grade at the time, and I was watching cartoons and eating my favorite cereal of all time, Kellogg's Frosted Flakes.
Oh, such a good one.
Yeah, and I was eating my Frosted Flakes just with a pair of shorts on, and there was this knock on the door, and I went out to the door and I opened it up, and there were like 25 teenagers, standing on my front door, and I'm eating my cereal, and they said, hey, we missed you. We want you to come back to church, but we're going bowling this afternoon, and we want you to come. And I said, okay, and they just stayed there, and I was like, well, I'll meet you there. They said, no, we'll wait on you. And I like, wait on me. They said, yeah, go in and get your clothes on and we'll just stand here. So I went inside and I put my stuff up and, went bowling with them. The next week they took me out to, we went roller skating and I remember going roller skating because there were these sophomore girls and junior girls that were just just gorgeous. And they invited me to couple skate with them, and of course, at that time I thought I had a chance as a 7th grade boy, and of course I didn't. But that was kind of part of what I meant by how they loved me into the kingdom. Now I'm very much pro evangelism. I'm very much present the gospel, share the gospel with people. So I don't believe that we should just let people see our good works. I mean, I do believe that we should share our faith with them. But at the end of the day, you can't browbeat somebody to come to Christ.
Yeah,
you've got to let them make the choice,
right,
and stuff. And so with me, I had heard the gospel, many times, and then I came to faith later. But the thing that I love most about that story about the teenagers coming on my front door is that they didn't want to just invite me to church. Mm-hmm. They wanted to be my family.
Right.
And they invited me. And at that time in my life, I was kind of a nerd. I wasn't a great athlete. I mean, I never became a great athlete. I worked hard to become average.
Right.
And but they included me. They brought me in. They built my confidence. I trusted them. I looked at them as sisters and brothers, and the older people in the church as mothers and fathers. And that's why I say they loved me in the kingdom. I mean, they presented the gospel to me, but they let me come to Christ on my own timing,
right,
and stuff. And so, but that's why I really, that's why I've grown in love with the church. Now, are there hypocrites? Absolutely. You're looking at one. I don't always practice what I preach,
especially at Thunder games.
Well, at Thunder games, yeah.
We'll talk about that later too.
Yeah. But I do believe that we need to be authentic, and we need to admit when we fail. My mother always had this view that church people were people with their nose up in the air looking down upon her. And sometimes she was right.
Right.
And but the youth group was real to me. They loved me, and they became my family. Not just on Sunday mornings, but when I would see them walking through the middle school school or the high school cafeteria, they were the same, and
right.
They were my family.
Man, that's good. And then there's another story part of your past and your history that I love you talking about is, so fast forward, you accepted Christ at the age of 16. Was it after that you kind of like, hey, I want to do this
pretty much
as a career and a ministry?
It wasn't long after that. I mean, I kind of had known, and this is kind of strange, but even before coming to Christ, I was close to God. I just wasn't part of the family. I was very close looking in. And even when I was like in 7th grade, when that youth group brought me in, my youth pastor, his name was Scott Garner, he would take me
He just passed away too, didn't he?
No, that was another one.
Oh, I've
had
okay.
three.
Okay.
I've had 3 youth pastors that have had tremendous influence in my life. But Scott would bring me to the retirement home, and he would teach me how to preach a sermon before I was even saved, before I even came to know Christ.
So you're preaching at nursing homes?
I was speaking at nursing homes in 7th and 8th grade.
Oh.
And so that was cool. And I already forgot your question.
Oh no, I don't remember either.
Yeah. But I mean, it was shortly after I became a believer that, as I said, Lord, what do you want me to do? Mm-hmm. And I made a commitment, at the time of salvation, where I told God, I'll go where you tell me to go. I'll do what you tell me to do. I'll say what you tell me to say, and I'll give what you tell me to give. And it was about that time that he said, Scott, I want to set you aside for vocational ministry. So when I was 16, I preached my own baccalaureate at my high school. And during my senior year, I returned to my roots of preaching at the retirement homes. And during the lunch hour, I would go to 2 different retirement homes, and I would preach there. And then when I went off to college, I was on staff at a church that eventually led me to meet my wife.
Yeah, because your first job in ministry was a youth pastor. Youth pastor. And how old were you?
I was probably 19 or 20, and I was a youth pastor of at Southwest Baptist Church in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, of some kids that were only a year younger than me. Yeah.
How was that? Was that interesting?
Well, I thought I knew everything at the time, so it didn't bother me, and we had a really successful youth ministry because my pastor was James Reeves. That you and I talked about.
Pirate Cowboy.
The Pirate Cowboy.
I hope he doesn't take offense to that. Well, he's
he'll love it.
Yeah.
But he called me to Fort Lauderdale because he was the senior pastor of the church, And I went out there for a summer, fell in love with it. I stayed, and then I went to school out there.
Yeah, well, going back to Dr. James Reeve, I just want to kind of give him a shout out real quick. Is he has 2 programs that are very powerful that we have one at our church right now. Yeah. It's called the Fearless Women's Series.
Right.
Fearless Women's
Fearless Series for Women.
Fearless Series for Women. It's basically a program, would you say, a program for women that have been sexually abused or have some sort of abuse in their life.
Yes.
And how to, get victories from that situation. And then also he just rolled out another one called the Men's Fearless Series.
Yes.
Which is for the same thing, but for men.
Right. I can't wait for us to show that because I've been able to preview it, and it's phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. I saw the first episode.
Yeah.
And it was shocking. It was like, whoa, what's going on? But the story I was trying to get back to was so you met your wife down in Florida. Tell me about that and tell me how long it took you guys to get married and the children's story.
Okay. So I was supposed to graduate of December of 84. And in September, my advisor brought me in and he says, Scott, we have a problem. And I realized that we didn't have a problem. I had a problem. And that was I had enough hours to graduate, but I didn't have the right classes. So I had to stay one extra semester, and I had to take a philosophy class and a science class. So I took the easiest philosophy and science classes that I could take. I took oceanography, and I took intro to philosophy. And so it was during that intro to philosophy class that I saw this beautiful woman that was sitting all the way to the right of the class, and I was all the way back to the left. And I was kind of intimidated by her because at that time I had never really gone out with a girl that wasn't a sure thing, And so every day I would scoot one seat over or one seat down until we were finally sitting right beside each other. And one day we started talking, and it was in February of 1985. I asked her to go to a Valentine's banquet, and she said no. But she kind of left me some hints, asked me out again, kind of in a only way that a woman could. And so our very first date was to the Billy Graham Crusade in Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so we met in February. We were engaged in April. We were married in July. All in the same year. So
is that less than 6 months?
Yeah, pretty much. And so when we had our birthdays in September, when we had our Thanksgiving holiday, when we had Christmas and New Year's, we hadn't even known each other for a year. And so when we got married, we wanted to wait 5 years and start having a family. And but by the time we celebrated our 5th anniversary, we had all 3 of our kids. and it was rough. And a matter of fact, because we didn't know each other very well and then had all the children all at one time, we found ourselves in marital counseling. That I was pastoring a church in Lantana, Florida, and we were in marital counseling, and which really saved our marriage and kind of set us on a path to where we are now. This summer we'll be married 39 years.
Oh, that's awesome. 39 years, 3 kids in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5?
Yeah, at least 5 grandchildren. And I say at least because there's a lot of kids that look to us as grandparents, so we get called honey and popo by a lot of kids
and a lot of adults. I call Sarah honey.
Yeah, I know. I'm a little bothered by that. A lot of men call my wife honey, and but I guess that's okay.
Yeah, you're gonna have to get over it because we'll get into why me and you our relationship has kind of grown.
Yes.
In kind of our history. We'll get to that here in just a minute. So let's go back to that kind of marital counseling, because it's kind of, as being a church leader and a leader of a church, like how is that trying to get outside counsel and outside help of having this leadership role of, typically they try to seem like they have it all together.
Right.
Which I don't know, maybe early on in your, ministry career, you probably maybe were sucked into that, but you obviously are not like that now.
Right. I've always known that I didn't have it all together, but early on in ministry, you try to hide that,
right?
Because that's a sign of weakness, and people look to pastors and leaders, for leadership. And I remember when Sarah and I would go to counseling, that first marital counseling, we would always come through the back door, because the counselor knew that there might be people sitting out in the lobby that were members of my church. And so, early on during those years, you try to You try to put on a smile. I remember one time my wife and I had one of our biggest arguments that we ever had. It was on a Saturday morning. We had to leave the house because we didn't want to argue in front of our kids. Mm-hmm. And we were sitting in the back parking lot of this church, and Sarah and I, we were going after each other. And I'm embarrassed to say, but we were.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, someone come and knocked on the window of our car, and it was a church member.
Oh, no.
And you should have seen us, how immediately we put on smiles and talked to them like everything's great and stuff. And then after they left, I really think it was at that time that I realized the hypocrisy.
Yeah.
That was in my heart. And then, honestly, it was shortly after that I finally got on some antidepressants, because up to that point, I'd always battled with what I would call funks, and I didn't know what that was. Right. And when my psychologist or psychiatrist told me that I was battling with clinical depression, I thought, well, I always thought crazy people got depressed.
Right.
My mother had some very mental issues through the divorce of my parents, but it was then when I kind of recognized that everybody has some hang up.
Oh, absolutely.
But at that time, you just don't admit it,
right.
Which really led me to eventually starting the Refuge and the philosophy that we have.
Yeah. And so, fast forward from the marriage counseling and, starting pastoring churches, the depression started growing.
Oh yeah, big time. And
so can you kind of talk about that? Of the apex of it, and then how that kind of built up? And
absolutely. The time that I really realized that I had an issue, that I needed psychological help, was we had gone on a vacation, snow skiing. I took my kids and my wife, and we met a good friend of mine and his family, and we would go out to Colorado, and we were snow skiing.
When was this? What year?
This was when I was in Macon, Missouri. I was there for 11 years before I came to Owasso. Okay. It was about halfway through there. It was probably in the I would say late 90s.
Okay.
And we had gone out snow skiing, and just everything had gone wrong, and I got back to the condo with my daughter Elena, because she didn't like to ski. I discovered then that all the girls in my family, they don't like snow skiing vacations. They like beach vacations.
Yeah.
And so
but you like beach vacations.
Well, I like beach as well, but my son and I like both. Or my son Nathan and I both like to go snow skiing, but my girls, that's not their thing. And so it took a while to figure out. And by the way, do the vacations that makes your wife happy.
Right.
All right. Happy wife, happy life.
Is that in the Bible?
It should be. It might be in one of those secret. It might be in one of those secret books.
Right.
And but when we got back from snow skiing, just Elaine and I had gone into my room. She had gone into her room. And I just lost it. I found myself in a fetal position in the closet, because I didn't want Sarah to hear, or I didn't want Elena to hear me. And she came in and she saw me there. And I realized at that moment that I had to get help.
Right.
I had to get help. And because I was keeping it in, my wife knew I had depression issues, but it was then that I went to see a psychologist, or psychiatrist, I should say, and he was the one who said, "Scott, you're dealing with clinical depression." And he kind of explained to me about the brain, and he explained to me about the chemicals in the brain and the synapse, and sometimes how they don't fire and stuff like that. And he put me on medicine, and at that moment, if I would exercise, and if I would take my medicine, and if I would see a counselor and take care of myself, I'd do pretty good. But over the time of the years, I would do what so many people do. I would think, well, I don't need the medicine anymore because I'm doing great. And so I'd get off the medicine. I'd stop exercising. I would stop, taking care of myself, emotionally. And so what started was just a kind of a big roller coaster. I would go down, and I would come back up, and I'd go back down. I'd take the medicine again, and then I'd get off of it. And but it wasn't until I came to Owasso, about halfway through my pastorate at Central, that I didn't have to be ashamed of the depression.
Yeah.
And that's when I began to share about it. And did it stop the depression from coming? No. I would still go through certain times. But it was also during that time that my wife said, "Scott, if we're going to stay married and we're going to have a happy family, you just can't stop taking it, the medicine
Right.
that is. And so it was at that moment that I realized I might be on medicine the rest of my life, and I was okay with that. The only problem with that, with me anyway, was that sometimes the medicine would just stop working.
Right.
Or I might not be so successful in my exercise and in my other areas. And so what I discovered was about every 5 years I would cycle. And I'd have to change medicines, and something else would have to help. But I will tell you this though, Stephen, is that every time I would get it from the pulpit, whether that be at Central or whether that be at the Refuge, and I would admit my struggle, there were always like one or two people that were really uncomfortable with their pastor saying that.
Right.
And they would come up and tell me that. They said, we just don't think that a pastor should admit
They
that.
need to be strong. They need to be a leader
Right.
of the church.
And they weren't just bad, but they just said they weren't comfortable with it. But
Right.
for every one person that said they weren't comfortable with it, 3 or 4 came up to me and said, thank you.
Right.
Because they felt like they had been hiding it.
Right.
And stuff. And there are even pastors today, that on social media that will contact me and say, you're not qualified to be a pastor. That just happened a few weeks ago. And
Don't you have a doctorate?
I do have a doctorate, and I have pastored for 30 to 40 years.
Yeah.
And stuff. And but again, I believe. I mean, one of the things that Jesus said that is really critical. He said, "I didn't come into this world to take care of the healthy, but I came for those that are sick." Mm-hmm. And what he meant by that is when he said he didn't come to minister to the healthy or to save the healthy, he was talking about the Pharisees who thought they were healthy. Mm-hmm. And if you remember, Jesus only had negative words for the religious leaders of his day. He was incredibly compassionate, to the lowly, to those that are sick, those that were the down and out. And so I paraphrase that passage in the gospel, and you hear me talk about this all the time.
Yes, I was hoping you were going to bring it up, because if you weren't going to bring it up, I was going to tell you to say the paraphrase.
And so the Carlson paraphrase of that verse is that Jesus didn't come for those who thought they had it all together, but he came for those that knew they were jacked up.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe that you're messed up or jacked up, give me 5 minutes into your life and into your brain, and I will show you how you are messed up like everybody else. And, I spent so many of my years feeling inferior, to other people, to other pastors, to other ministries. And it took me to get, into my late 40s to finally realize, that the more you think about it, the more a person says, I don't care what people think, they care what people think.
Yeah.
And the more the people that try to portray that they've got it all together, they don't.
Right.
It's they're insecure in themselves. And so it has been so freeing, to be able just to admit that and let people judge, because I'm not here. Scott Carlson, his ministry, my ministry, doesn't exist for those that want to keep their sins secret. I'm here for those that have fallen on the ground and they know they need a Savior to get back up. Now, I don't credit medicine, for saving me. I don't credit counseling for saving me. I credit Jesus for saving me, but he uses medicine, and he uses psychiatrists, and he uses counselors, with their gifts to help me.
Yeah.
And will I continue to suffer from depression? I hope not, but history tells me I probably will.
Right.
And that's okay. I mean, even the Apostle Paul, and I know there's a lot of debate about what he meant by that, but the Apostle Paul, said, there were three times he asked God to protect him from the thorn in the flesh that Satan had given him, and 3 times God said, my grace is sufficient. So we're all under attack. We all have our issues. I know yours.
Yep.
And you know mine, because we allow each other into each other's lives.
Yeah, and so when you were at the last church, and you parted ways with that church, you were questioning at that point if you wanted to start up a new church. And also at that last church, because I remember this, because me and Taylor started going to this church around this time. You were trying to start up a hospital church within that, and it fell apart. It didn't really work.
It didn't fit, the church that I was at. And,
Right.
and that's okay because there are so many different churches. Every church has their own, their own link and their own sync and stuff like that. And so it just didn't work there.
Right, and that's fine. But at that point, you were kind of wanting to start into that ministry
Absolutely.
of like getting into that.
Absolutely.
And I think that was part when you were in your
Depression.
Depression.
Yeah.
And
I lost a ministry. I lost that ministry, as a result of my deep depression. I'm not upset at the church at all. They're growing. They're doing great right now.
My parents still go to that church.
Yeah,
They love
yeah.
it.
They've got a phenomenal new pastor, and they're doing good, and I'm happy for them. But I see now when I look back that God was pointing me in a different direction. I couldn't do there what I'm doing at the Refuge.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm incredibly thankful for that. And so when we started the Refuge, and so basically, when I left Central, I thought to myself, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
I got three choices. I can go into the secular world, which nothing wrong with that.
You've done that before? You sold, didn't you sell makeup or something?
No, I did not sell makeup. I sold high fashion jewelry.
Oh, high fashion jewelry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Sold
there's
high
a difference.
fashion jewelry.
Well, honestly, there was about a year that the way I provided for my family was that I came alongside Sarah and I sold high fashion jewelry with her, and I did funerals for a living. There were 3 funeral
So
homes.
is that why you got so good at funerals? You were probably the best. Hopefully I don't die before you, but if you do, you're doing my funeral.
Okay,
You're great at them.
Well, there was a period of time for about a year.
Is that bad to say you're good at funerals?
Well, you help people when they're hurting and stuff. And it's easier to do a funeral than a wedding.
Yeah.
Because at a funeral, they don't talk back.
Right.
And at a wedding, it's filled with a lot of drama. Now, I enjoy about 2 out of every 10 weddings that I do. And because let's move on from that. I'll get myself in trouble. But I did, I did those things. And so, but I knew that when I left Central, I could go into the secular world. I could go back to a traditional church, put my resume out,
right.
Or I could start a church. And for some reason, the starting of the church, starting a brand new church, was the thing that challenged me and whetted my appetite. And I had never started anything new. I had always been in established churches, but I'd always been thinking, if I ever start a church, this is how I'd want to do it.
Which is kind of crazy because, Scott, don't take which I've offended you before, and I'll probably do it again, but you're not the youngest.
No. Church planning is a young man's game.
Yeah.
And so when I went off to get evaluated, and every denomination does it differently, but I went off and I was assessed, and I looked around all these young guys. I was definitely one of the old guys of the group, and so but the one advantage that I do have, is that I've got 30 plus years of experience,
right.
Where I don't get easily discouraged, where before I might get easily discouraged. Because a lot of church plants, they fail, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And one statistic is only about 50% of them last past 4 to 5 years. Of
Refuge
brand new,
is that 4?
Yeah, we're at right between 4 and 5.
Okay. Okay. Well,
And I think we're doing.
Yeah, we're doing good.
I think we're doing well.
We're doing good.
Yeah.
And then also during this time when you were let go from Central, you were in a deep depression too.
Yeah,
so
I was.
You're older pastor in a deep depression, and you said, I want to start a new church. And Sarah was all on board.
She was like, no way. She wanted me to get a secular job, that made 6 figures, that had a corner office, and I'd come home every day at 5.
Yeah.
And I told Sarah, I said, honey, they don't have those kind of jobs for guys that have only done ministry. And no offense to used car salesmen, but I'm not a used car salesman. And I couldn't do it. And so, but we began to pray, and we began to kind of just ask the Lord what he wanted me to do. And Stephen, I went back to my salvation. I went back to June 1st, 1979. And I remembered the prayer that I prayed to God then. Mm-hmm. And we call it the prayer of refuge. We call it the prayer of revival. But I came back to that, and I said, God, I told you I will go where you tell me to go. I will do what you tell me to do. I will say what you tell me to say, and I'll give what you tell me to give. And we began to pray. We had I think it was October of that year before we started the launch team, and And I just kind of put out a fleece. I put out a word, to a lot of people that I know that go to other churches or don't go to church anywhere. And I said, hey, I'm exploring the idea of possibly starting a new church, and who would be interested. And I probably had 30, 40 people that expressed interest. And a lot of those people aren't with us anymore.
Right.
They came from another church and they helped us get started, and then they went back to their other church.
Yeah,
and stuff, and that was cool. But I mean,
I remember a couple of those families, because
Yeah.
that's what they said. They said, "Hey, we're helping you. We're here to help you get started."
Right.
And then after, I think most of them left after a year, maybe 18 months,
Yeah.
and then they went back to their.
Yeah.
But that was really cool.
Yeah.
That was really cool that they're willing to come help us, get started, and they volunteered and helped with different aspects. And I forgot about that.
And that's usually the case in new churches. But what a lot of people don't realize, before a new church is started, you have what's called a launch team, and they're the ones that meet with you. And that's what we did for a full year.
Right.
And what a lot of people don't realize is that by the time that the church is established, the great majority of those people on your launch team aren't there anymore. And I hope we're the exception, because you were part of the launch team.
Yeah. No, I mean, and now my wife's about to take over
the children Absolutely.
Ministry, and I'm part of the tech ministry and also the recovery ministry. And so since we fast forward to almost present day, so you're about to start up the Refuge, and a Facebook message comes, or my parents send us a post you made saying, hey, I'm in the process of starting this new church. If you're interested, reach out to us. And so at that point, this was about, I don't know, October of 2019. I don't remember what year it was. Maybe 2018. Maybe 2019. But anyway, so I'm a recovering alcoholic, for people that are watching. Obviously, Scott knows. But I'm a recovering alcoholic. During this period of time, I was struggling with my sobriety. Didn't really know what to do. And my dad came to you and basically asked, hey, my son, and we'll get more to that story here in just a second, but my dad came to you before you were let go of Central saying, hey, my son is struggling. Would you mind talking to him? And you said, absolutely, I'll talk to him. And then a couple months later, you were let go. And so my parents sent me this message saying, hey, Scott's starting up this new church, blah, blah, blah. You guys, if you're interested, you need to reach out to him. And so during this time, I was going to a lot of different recovery groups, went to AA, went to this thing called Celebrate Recovery, which is really cool. And what I've learned through those ministries is that it's self-discovery. And also I really liked it because when you walk into those different groups and those different programs, everyone takes off their mask.
Right.
And everyone's open, and you can see the hurt. Mm-hmm. And also you can see the victories too, which is powerful. And I really liked that. And I said, man, I was talking to someone that was part of our lunch team before they were part of our lunch team. And we were both there talking in the parking lot of Celebrate Recovery. And I told him, I was like, man, I wish the church was like this. I wish the church was just so open and people didn't have to put on their mask walking into their church and taking off their mask. That, people just shared their hurt, because it's a lot easier to go through something when someone can share that burden or share that load with you. And so when we sat down, me and Taylor sat down with you in our living room.
I remember that day.
Yeah. We sat down with your living room, and that was the first time I ever told someone that I was an alcoholic and I struggled. It was to you. And you basically told us your vision of what the Refuge would be, and it was everything that I was asking for, of people just being open. And then and a couple months later, you challenged me to do something. But I remember that, and it was very, very powerful. So starting up the Refuge, you basically had this idea of what the church, and so what is the Refuge? What is the Refuge? So
the scripture, of course, there are many times in the scripture that says that God is our refuge. And so, we are his representation here on earth. And so we want to be a refuge for people. We want to be a safe place, for people, not just to take off their mask, but when they fall, we want to be the first ones to pick them back up. I heard a long time ago that the Christian army is about the only army that puts out their wounded. Mm-hmm. Or, they take up a bazooka and boom, they blow them away. And that's just not the gospel. I mean, that's not the gospel. I think of Jesus, ministering to the woman that had got caught in adultery. And it was kind of amazing, that story, because no one talked about the man that was committing adultery with a woman, but it was the woman that was caught in adultery. And Jesus basically challenged all the religious leaders around him. Hey, listen, if you haven't sinned, feel free to go and stone her. You know, and of course they dropped their stones and they walked away. And Jesus told the woman, who accuses you? And she says, they're all gone. And Jesus said, go and sin no more. And so, there's a lot of, I don't agree with everybody when they say, we're not supposed to judge. We're supposed to judge, but we're not supposed to judge in the way that the world judges, and when I say judgment, when you sin, I hold you accountable.
Right.
And when I sin, I want you to hold me accountable and stuff. But it's not the purpose of downing you. It's about lifting you up. It's about getting you back up, because if you are a true believer in Jesus, you know when you sin.
Right.
Because the Holy Spirit convicts you of that. And so the Refuge, we are a regular church per se, but we are a hospital church. And that is, we see that everybody, needs recovery.
Right.
Whether it be from alcohol, whether it be from divorce, whether it be from depression, or whether it be from pride, whether it be from, lying or cheating or stealing or whatever it is. And so we want to be a safe place. And do we fail? Absolutely we fail. But we own up to it when we fail.
Right.
And we pick it back up the next day. We're about to do this free garage sale that we do each year. And the very first year we did this free garage sale, there was a lady by the name of Sherry. Mm-hmm. And Sherry came up and people said, "Oh, Pastor, you need to meet Sherry." And I went out and talked to her, and Sherry says, "I don't have any friends." And I remember that day I said, "Sherry, I tell you what, we will be more than to you as friends. We'll be your family." And to this very day, Sherry continues to come, and she loves the free garage sale because now she's going to help become friends with other people.
Yeah.
And so, when I think of who is the Refuge, I think of people like Sherry. I think of people like you, and your wife. Mm-hmm. I think of people like my son-in-law who lost a son a few years ago. I think of Peggy who lost a son. I think of, we have so many people in our church that have lost children or teenagers or even adult children. Yeah. But what do? They hurt, they grieve, but they minister to other people that hurt. And so our, so when you say, what is the Refuge? Our identity statement is really simple. We are a community of hurting people, bringing hope to hurting people through Jesus. We don't wallow in our hurt, but we admit our hurt. Right. And then we go about the business of helping others, with hope that are hurting. And then the key word is hope, because one day Jesus will wipe away all of our tears. Not today. Today we cry, but when he returns, that's when he wipes away the tears. Yeah. And I love that part of who we are.
So going back to a point you said about, the church brings out their bazookas on people that
we do.
So I fell before I'm sober now, but I fell and I
a few times,
not just once, a few times within the church, which was really interesting doing that in a church, or being open in a church setting, because I think that opened a lot of people's eyes within our church, because our church was aware of every time that I fell, because you challenged me on the first time that I fell. I came to you, or maybe my wife came to you and said, I fell, and you talked to me and you said, Stephen, I need you to do something for me, and it's going to take courage. I need you to get up in front of the church and tell them that you fell.
Yeah.
Whew. Oh, man. And, gosh, I was like, what? I was like, I don't want to do that. And you're like, Stephen, I need you to do it.
Yeah.
I need you to do it.
Yeah.
Because I want you to see what happens. And I got in front of the church. It was at the community center. And I was doing this right here.
Yeah.
And I just said, hey, I have an issue with alcohol, and I fell, and I need your prayers. And boom, I stopped. And everybody just came in and, hugged us, hugged me and Taylor. And it was powerful.
Yeah.
It was a powerful moment. And it was a bazooka, but it was a bazooka of love.
and Stephen, the reason I asked you to do that was not just for you, but it was for the people out there as well.
Right.
Because we had a couple that was sitting in the church building that day whose husband has all sorts of substance abuses. And when we did that, your wife openly admitted how hard it is to be married to an alcoholic. And there was a woman whose boyfriend at the time, I think they're husband and wife now, whose boyfriend at the time was on all these other drugs. And she was also in tears that day because she was like, I need people like this. I don't need people out there judging me or telling me I shouldn't be married to this guy. And so, I mean, because I came to your house right when you got back from California, you know, and you weren't excited to see me.
No.
And then
there's been a couple times I've been excited to see you.
But then as we talked, you know, I mean, I don't know if I would do this with every person that sins, but I just felt impressed to encourage you to do that.
Yeah, and you actually told me that a couple weeks later, like you came to me and apologized, and I said, no, I needed that.
Yeah.
And I wish that story I wish I could end that story right there and say, hey, I stayed sober, you know, for years and years and years after that. But I fell a couple more times after that. But the church has helped me so much. So, you know, I got in front of the church. I shared that story. And then, you know, probably about 6 or 8 months later, COVID happened. I got let go from my job. And this is kind of a funny story. After I lost my job, I didn't really know what I was going to do, blah, blah, blah. I got stressed, and I relapsed again. And at that point, my wife was done.
Right.
She was done. And I don't know exactly how you came into the picture, so maybe you can clear some things up because I wasn't obviously in the right state of mind at that point to remember all the details. But I fell, and I woke up the next morning in the upstairs bedroom of Hotel Carlson, a.k.a. Scott Carlson's house.
Right.
So how did that happen?
Well, how that happened was that your wife was tracking you on the phone where you were at, and I was driving all over Owasso trying to find you, but you were always one step ahead. and until I finally found you going through the drive-through at a local restaurant. And I went over and I got in your car and you looked at me and said, well, hey, Pastor Scott. And we took that journey back to my house. And I had just got off the phone with a friend of mine that I had met actually through James Reeves to another church in Oklahoma City where there was this fella that was very familiar with a place called Rob's Ranch. And that's when I had shared that with your wife. And you're right. That's when your wife said, that's it. He's going. Either he has two choices. You're either going to rehab for 3 months or you're not coming back home.
Yeah, which were two terrible options.
Right.
Those both sucked.
Yeah.
I wanted a third option, but I didn't have one.
But we took you to Rob's Ranch.
Yep.
And to my knowledge, I think your own testimony is that you have been sober ever since.
Ever since.
Yeah.
Yep. So my sobriety date was May 27th is the day you left me at Rob's Ranch.
Right.
I don't say you dropped me off. You just left me.
Yes, I did.
You just left me. But it was also very powerful for us. If we didn't have that community around us, and I would say the Refuge, but it was that community. It was those people that were in our life, which was the Spencer family.
Yes.
You know, Haley and Matt and Kim and Alan and Haley or Elena and Billy. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be a couple people that I miss, but I never mention their names when I say my testimony. And I want to give them their flowers on this. But they were able to help with my family as I was gone. Taylor had people and friends that were really close with, you know, Haley, you know, Elena, and all the streets. And so they were able to lean on that. But also they helped me because my wife was done.
Yes.
So if that family wasn't, or that community wasn't there, I would have nothing at rehab. Like I wouldn't have clothes, I wouldn't have bedding, I wouldn't have food, I wouldn't have anything. So the women of the community of the Refuge actually got all my stuff together and dropped it off at your house before you took me to rehab. And so that was really, really cool that they were able to come together and do that for me. And then also I asked you two things, or I asked you one thing when we were driving down there. I said, hey, Scott, is this really 90 days? And you're like, yeah. Because I thought it was 30. I didn't know it was going to be 90, which most rehab facilities are just 30 days.
Right.
And I would talk about anything in the world except for
Your problem.
My problem
Yeah.
on the way down there.
Yeah, if we talk secular things, you talk to me. And the moment that I would bring anything up about Stephen, I love you, or, this is for your good, you went stone cold and wouldn't talk to me. We talk about onion rings, but we wouldn't talk about Jesus, or we wouldn't talk, because you were mad. You were pissed off.
Yeah. And then there's one thing that you said to me that stuck with me, and you said, it was getting probably close to where you were dropping me off at. You probably don't remember this, but you said, Stephen, I don't care if you hate me for the rest of your life, but I don't want to see you die.
Yeah.
So if that comes to you hating me for the rest of my life, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But I love you.
I love you too, Stephen.
And you need to get help. And so May 27th, got sober, got out of Rob's Rants 90 days later. And so coming up here actually this podcast will probably come out I think I might launch it on my sobriety day, May 27th. So May 27th will be 4 years. And we now have a recovery group at the church. And we, basically the recovery group was set up for me.
Right. Well, it actually was, because when you were gone, I was scrambling to get something started by the time you got back. And it's been going ever since.
Yeah. And so that's the cool thing about the Refuge is we offer a lot of programs, and we're in the future too coming up, which we're really excited about. Is we got the recovery group on Tuesday nights. We do the women's the Fearless series for women. We also are going to start up the men's series. Then we're also going to do Re-Engaged,
right?
Which is a marriage program that me and my wife went through about a year ago, which was really great for me, but also really great for my wife,
right?
Because she had a lot of built up resentment and, I don't want to say hate, but just built up resentment towards me through that time that I took her of, me not being sober, me being, intoxicated. So we're bringing that to the church.
Yes.
And then we're also in talks of bringing up a men's pornography.
Absolutely.
You want to talk about that for a second?
Well,
it's such a problem.
For the last, I don't know, ever since we've had the internet, has been, of course, there's been pornography problems since dawn. Even since when David was walking, on his porch and he saw Bathsheba giving herself a bath. That's kind of pornography. And so it's ever since we've had mankind, we've had that problem of lust and things. But even since the internet, we have an epidemic of men. The statistics are unbelievable about how many men, look at pornography at a given time over a month. And so we're fooling ourselves. We've got our head in the sand if we don't think that there's a problem.
Right.
And so we're going to hit this head on as well, and we're going to offer this to men. And it's not just a man problem. A lot of people think that only men struggle with pornography. That's not true anymore. Women do as well. And it's an addiction. And it's a sickness. People just think it's a choice. Well, a lot of people say that when a man, I'm not an expert on this, but when a man looks at pornography, it's like, the man just got a little bit of cocaine. He got so high,
There's
on that
to it.
dopamine, high and stuff like that. And so we need to attack those issues as well.
And it's in the church too.
Oh, it's everywhere. Oh, it's if it's in mankind, it's just as much as in the church as it is anywhere else. Because again, everybody's jacked up with something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I want to say it was like 85 or 86%.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you look, and just to put in, if you looked out in your church body, if you go on a Sunday, look out at church body, I can guarantee you 1,000% at least half of the men in that room.
Oh yeah. And much higher than that have had some type of issue with it, in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's something, but not a lot of churches talk about it.
No, they don't talk about it because they don't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
And if you bury it, you're never going to fix it.
Right.
And so, our job is, again, I think this is part of the problem that people that don't know the Lord, why they think the church is hypocritical, because we bury so much of the things. There's an epidemic of churches covering up sex abuse all across America, and we've got to be honest and open about it. And we've got to take steps again, when a person that doesn't know the Lord look to me, they're not looking for me to be perfect. They just want me to be honest.
Right.
They want me to be open about my own hang-ups. And I think there's the issue, because Jesus never said follow me and life's going to get hunky-dory.
Right.
You know, if anything, if we become followers of Jesus, life's going to get more difficult because Satan attacks us and because people's expectations and our own expectations upon ourselves. And so I just think when we're open and honest, people respect us more, and you know, I think it's the way of Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, you started with you being honest at the pulpit, and by challenging me to be honest, I was able to help so much more people.
Absolutely.
Being open and honest
Yeah.
about my struggles. Because what's that scripture? Because I butcher scriptures. What's that one? You know which one I'm talking about. My favorite scripture, lead with weakness.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there were two things that Paul bragged about.
Yeah.
You know, he bragged about the cross and he bragged about his weakness. Because when we admit our weakness, then God has an avenue to go through our lives to make it a strength. Mm-hmm. And so you know, that's what we talk about. And Paul talked about that to the Corinthians.
Yep. I'm not going to brag about my strengths, but brag about my weakness.
Yeah. Paul said I could brag about it,
Yeah.
you know, but well, what good would that do? You know,
None.
absolutely.
None.
Yeah.
None. So I was able through that. I was able to, through my testimony,
Absolutely.
help a lot more people, and because it's good. That's good. So so where can people find the Refuge at?
Well, I mean, you can find us on the webpage at www.therefugeowasso.com. You can find us. We're on 116th Street, right beside the Dirty Dog Car Wash and the Owasso Sports Complex. Our address is actually 109th East Avenue, but I tell everybody, come to the Dirty Dog Car Wash and then get your car washed, then come over to the Refuge and we'll cleanse your soul.
That's good.
Yeah.
You say that?
I do say that.
Oh, okay.
Well, sometimes when you're working the tech back there, you don't, you know, sometimes
I gotta watch the service twice.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So you
get a little snooze every now and then.
I get a snooze every now and then, and you're not afraid to call me out, which
No.
I'm okay with that
Yeah.
too. So before we end up, since I don't know where I'm going to post this podcast at, so it might be on my traditional YouTube channel. So let's talk a little bit about Owasso real quick. Just wrap it up. So you lived in Owasso for how long?
Coming up 18 years.
18 years.
Yeah.
So what just like generally in the Tulsa area, what have you come? What do you like about Owasso? What do you like about Tulsa? What do you like about Oklahoma? Because you have lived, in Florida. And,
I mean, I'm an Okie at heart.
Yeah.
And if you got to live anywhere in Oklahoma, I think Northeast Oklahoma is the place to live because we got lakes, it's green country. You got Tulsa. I mean, Oklahoma City, they might have the river walk, but I've always loved the Tulsa area.
Yeah.
And so I love Owasso because it's got about everything you need, but it still feels country except for traffic. But it still feels country because there's so many 1 acre lots, and where I live, there's still a lot of places around that you feel like it's got space and stuff like that. And we've got good schools. We've got a city government that invites pastors once a month to come in with the city administrator and to pray for the city.
Oh, that's
and,
good.
And pastors from all the different denominations join together and they pray with the city administrator.
Yeah, why do you think it is Oklahoma is considered the belt buckle of the Bible Belt?
Well, I think everywhere in the Bible Belt, everybody claims to be the buckle.
Oh, okay.
And so, but I would say that there are still, a lot of, and I think this is to our advantage, but sometimes I think it's a challenge as well because everybody's a pretty good old boy, and sometimes being good can rob you of really knowing the Lord.
Right.
And because you rest upon your good works. But there are a lot of great churches. I mean, I'm friends with a lot of the pastors in Owasso, and we're not competitive with each other. We're not territorial. We believe that God has given each of the pastors, each of the shepherds, a certain amount of sheep to care for. And I think that's one of the things that makes Owasso special.
Yeah.
And I'm not against Tulsa. I love Tulsa. I love Broken Arrow, Jinx, Bixby. I've got pastoral friends and partners through there as well. But there is something special, about this area that, that's why a lot of people move here. They're moving from California. They're moving from the Northwest and the Northeast.
Yeah.
And they're coming here. It's not all because of your great real estate genius, but it's part of it. But
Yeah. People see the value of moving to Oklahoma, and most of the people that actually move to Oklahoma just have similar values and views as the rest of Oklahoma. So I think that's really the main reason.
Yes.
Why, and the affordability, obviously. But the joke that I always tell in my videos is what makes the greater Tulsa area, particularly Owasso, different is that there's a church on every corner and there's a marijuana dispensary on every single corner.
And chicken restaurant.
Oh, and chicken restaurant.
Yeah.
We got a lot of chicken restaurant. So just real quick, give me the top 3 things that you love about living in Oklahoma.
Oh, well, number one, people are genuine. If you need help, they'll help you. I mean, I've noticed that on the highway. I've noticed that, when my car breaks down, people are just immediately there to help. Number two, it's a great place to raise kids. I've lived in South Florida. Wouldn't want to raise kids in South Florida. And so I think raising kids is another one. And I just think that there is just a freedom, to share the gospel wherever, and you're not looked down upon, as some other parts of the country. I mean, it's growing, it's changing a little at a time, but I kind of see that Oklahoma is kind of the last holdout of those family values.
Mm-hmm. Well, Scott, I appreciate you jumping on today. I'm going to have you on again.
Yeah,
we'll do it all again. So once again, thank you so much. And if you want to learn more about the Refuge, you can go to the refugeowasso.com.
That's right.
We also have a Facebook page. And
it's also the Refuge Owasso.
Yeah, Refuge Owasso. So if you're interested, or if you're looking for a church home, or if you just want to come by and say hi, definitely we'd love to see you. Sunday services are at 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. and then starting at
10:45.
10:45, and then we have a breakfast.
We have a breakfast from 9:15 to 10:45. It's pretty cool.
Okay, cool. So yeah, come check out the Refuge, and you will see both of us there. So thanks for watching. Perfect. Done. That was good.
Good job, buddy.
That was
proud
good.
of you.
Man, that was good. Whoa. That would have been bad. I almost fell. How'd it feel?
Good, natural.
Good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Natural. Right. Sarah, how'd that one go from yesterday?